Good morning. I'm Pastor Jimmie Burse, and my wife of 42 years, 4 months, and 7 days is Celia Burse. And we are extremely happy to be sharing with our mentees, James and Tasha. We are extremely proud of them and the work that they have embarked upon, and we know that God is going to use them tremendously. But we just want to take this time today because we're not able to be there personally due to some pastoral arrangements and things that we must take care of, some details. But we want to just let you know that God is an awesome God and that God has a purpose for marriage. And He wants us to know and to understand that if we're going to stay focused on what He has for us in marriage, we must first of all know that we have an enemy. The enemy is Satan, and he desires to steal and to kill and to destroy relationships. That's his whole desire. But God has brought us into this relationship, and we must understand that with Him all things are possible, and there's nothing too hard for God. We have to remind ourselves of what Revelations chapter 2 and verse 4 talks about. Verse 4 and verse 5. Verse 4 tells us, "Nevertheless, I have somewhat against thee." And it says, "Because thou hast left thy first love. And remember, therefore, from whence thou art fallen, and repent and do the first works." You know what? We must understand that when the enemy comes in to destroy relationships, his concern is again, as it is with Christ in the church, and we know that Christ has compared marriage relationships to him and the church. In Ephesians chapter 5, he tells the husband, "Husbands, love your wife, even as Christ also loves the church and gave himself for it." So in that comparison, he wants us to know and he wants us to understand that the enemy seeks to destroy relationships. You know what? And what he does is he gets our mind off of those things that we were doing at first. That's what John talks about here in Revelation. When he talks about that we have fallen and come away from the first works. The first works, which really begins to bring us to that moment to appreciate what marriage is all about, because it's in those first works that you really begin to romance your partner. You really begin to look for the purpose and the position by which God has brought you together in that relationship. You do some things at that particular time that you perhaps let it slip away from you. You fall away from those things, and it's because of that that we find ourselves being caught up and trapped in situations by which we begin to watch how the romance diminishes. But God is saying that if we just learn how to go back to those first things, when he tells us right there in Revelations chapter 2 verse 5, he says that you need to repent and do the first works. I'm challenging you today, if your relationship has reached that point where you are no longer sizzling, you are fizzling, I want to encourage you right now. You can get the sizzling back in your relationship if you just simply return to those first works. I'm encouraging you to remember. I'm encouraging you to reflect. I'm encouraging you to rejoice in those things that you did first in your romance. Begin to allow your relationship to be rekindled, because that's really what's going to make it be all God will have it to be. I'm challenging you today. Listen to what James and Tasha is going to share with you today, and allow yourself to find that as you leave there today, you're going to leave there with a sizzling relationship simply because you have returned back to the first works. I hope you have a blessed day, and it is our prayer that your relationship will find this purpose afresh, and that your relationship will begin to be all God will have it to be, so you will be an example to your children, to all of those that see, that they know that you have a love one for another, first of all because you have a love for Christ. Be blessed. This is Pastor Burse praying up on you along with my wife Celia to have a blessed day in the Lord.